Hello and welcome to Healthcare Careers in Focus. Today we're going to be looking at job opportunities in social care, and we're joined by Paul, who's going to be talking to us about his career in social care as well as some of the opportunities available to you. So welcome, Paul. Hello.
Hi, Kate.
So should we start with your kind of career journey, because you've had quite the varied journey in social care, haven't you?
I did. I started when I was 16 years old, before sixth form become compulsory and further education. I started my career as a care worker at the age of 16, which apparently was quite young. It still is at the time. My first role was on a government training scheme where I was paid £25 a week. I know, shocking by today's standards. And my role was to work in day centres for Harlow Council for Voluntary Services. And my role was to go to 5 independent day services scattered around Harlow in Essex and work as a care worker during the day. And at that time, my day started at 8:30 to 4:30. My journey was I hadn't really had much contact with older people. I'd met obviously my grandparents and older aunties and that, but to be confronted on my first day with a room of 24 older people, all looking at me like new blood, and I'm like, I really don't know what I'm doing. And to top it all, on my first ever day's work with the elderly, it was going off to Hyde Park to see a military brass band. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're taking me to London. Mum won't even know where I am. She thinks I'm in Harlow. So we went off for the day. And on my first day of my job, I had to push a gentleman called Joe. I've got his permission. I mean, I know it's many years ago now, but I've always, remember Joe. And he was an older gentleman in a wheelchair, and he was an amputee. He'd lost his leg. And I'd never pushed a wheelchair before in my life. And off we trotted, and it was like pushing a supermarket trolley. I was everywhere, but bless him, he had the patience and said, look, you will get it one day, mate. And all these years on, I still think of that day and think, thank you, Joe, because I wanted to go home and cry because I thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't know what I'm doing. Then, sort of day two, it got better, day three, and so forth. So I continued my career for a year in these older people's day centres, and it's fantastic fun. The stories that people could tell you, the skills that I learned. I mean, basically, I learned everything from how to play bingo through to tea dances, which is now strictly come dancing. So, again, I was head of the game. And then I continued my career with older people for many years. I was very, very happy. But the only thing with the older people was because they're sort of in the later stage of their life, they'd pass over. So to me, as a young 16-year-old going on sort of 18, 19 during my career, it was like, oh my gosh, these people are dying. I like them and they've died. And it was a real quite traumatic moment. So again, that's one of the sort of downsides to it. But then on the flip side, I had the privilege of sort of having a dance with them, playing the bingo, playing a bit of snooker with the guys, talking about whatever they wanted to talk about. And it was a privilege to be part of their lives. Then sort of as time went on, I decided a career change came. And the career change came because one of my friends turned around and said, look, my girlfriend at the time, he said, wants a man. I mean, this is before equality, diversity and inclusion, obviously, to work at her day centre. And I went, yeah, okay. And I popped off to a place called Epping, still in Essex, but a bus ride out of Harlow, which was like, oh, big day out, going out of my sort of comfort zone. So I went off to Epping, and it was a small day service called Wish. And I thought that sounds like a really good fun charity. And what it actually meant was we're involved with the severely handicapped. Back in them days, they were the type of language that was still being used. And this was a charity actually called that. And I walked in the front door, and there was 8 sort of people between 18 and 40, all with what we call learning disabilities. Some were unable to walk, some were had limited vocabulary. So a gentleman I walked in was blowing raspberries at me. I mean, on your first day of the new job, I was like, oh my gosh, this is different. I was used to my older people that were really like, in tune with life and what was happening in the world. And suddenly this guy's blowing a raspberry at me. I'm like, what's this? What's occurring? So anyway, I went through the interview and I was successful and they offered me a job, because I had previous care experience. Because again, a lot of people think you can just walk into a care job, that anybody can do it. And just to reassure you, not everybody can do it because you do have to have the mindset that you can do it. So again, you will hear more about that in other sort of career talks. So I got off my job in this Centre for Learning Disabilities, and I started on my first day. I didn't have a clue of how to speak to somebody who couldn't speak back to me. My care career was, I speak to you, you speak back. And there's a guy blowing raspberries, there's another guy throwing his banana milkshake. I was like, what have I walked into here? Another one was making sort of screaming sounds, but that was her form of communication. So I was very, very happy there and had a great year. We went swimming, we went horse riding, we went out on day trips. And yes, people do say to me when I tell them I work in care, they go, "Oh, do you have to wipe people's bums?" That's the media perception. And that's about 5% of my working day was doing that. The other 95% will be doing art and craft, doing dancing, doing drama, going out for day trips, doing cooking, assisting people to eat and drink as well, and supporting them to lead an independent life. Because that's the difference between elderly and people with learning disability. Older people, quite often, they've had a full life, an independent life. The people with learning disabilities aspire to have a full and independent life, like the life that you're leading. They want to go out to gigs, they want to go shopping. They don't want to be sitting in a room looking at the telly with the radio on. They want to live a full and active life. So my time went through that, and then because our little day centre was based on the hospital grounds, the hospital then said, "Look, we're going to take you over. It's silly, we can't fund you within your little unit in the corner," which was a lovely little unit, one of the best jobs I've ever had. You're going to have to come into our main hospital site because that's the way it was. So we moved over to the sort of main hospital site, and it expanded because we went from like a little 8-person unit, like a sort of extended family, because the charity was run by the families of the young people or the children that went to this service. So now we're in this big NHS block. It was like there was 4 bungalows with 6 individual adults living in there. There's a day centre for 80 people. It's like another transition. It's like, oh, well, I like these other people. Because you do get close. You shouldn't have favourites, but life is life. There'll be people you like more than others. Not that you should ever show that as a professional. So then my career developed through that, and the NHS was a much bigger playing field for me because we were all very cosy, all very family orientated. And that was in a more professional environment where there was much more training available. So that's where I started doing my care qualifications. Before it was, "Oh, well, you've got the right experience, Paul. You seem a nice guy. You know, the people you're supporting seem to like you. The families do. Let's get on." Now it was, you're actually going to be trained to do what you do. And in the modern era, that's absolutely the norm for all care staff to be trained. Whereas before it was, you seem like a nice person you can work in it, but that's all changed because it's a very, very professional environment now. So then from the NHS, I defected to Hertfordshire. I left Harlow again. I went over the bridge and I actually applied to work in what we call supported living, which is where people go and live. It's their flats. They live there 24/7. It's the day centres, 8:30 to 4:30, Monday to Friday. Whereas when you go to work in somebody's house, it's like your house. You go shopping, you go cleaning, you have to manage your household budgets. You've got that to come. Enjoy it while you're at home if you are living at home. It's the best deal ever. So anyway, I went to apply for this supported living unit, and I thought the interview was going well in Bishop Stortford. I was quite happy with it. And at the end of it, there was 2 people interviewing me, and one of them went, "Actually, do you know, I need somebody like you to work in my day centre in Hoddesdon." I'm like, where even is Hoddesdon? So I was very naive then. It was before Google Maps. It was like, okay, I haven't applied for this. So I went down and started doing a day service there. And again, best place of it, it had its own swimming pool, believe it or not. Can you imagine that? Your own heated swimming pool. And we're not talking the local public pool. We're talking a nice 80, 90 degrees. So, oh, beautiful. So on your lunch breaks, you could go have a little swim. I know it's very shallow of me to sort of behave like that, but got in there and they said, right, you're going to be working with these amazing people who don't want to come to the day centre. I'm like, well, that's a bit back to front. They don't want to come to your day centre. So what am I going to do with them? They said, and that's where it all started, was what we now know as person-centred work. They were saying, I don't want to do pottery anymore. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to do this. I want to do what I want to do. And my job is running what was called a drop-in. So I started off with a core group of 10 people who had to come to the day centre because it was respite for them, from their families, and the families from them. Because all this about, oh, you know, it's respite when they go to the care service. No, it's respite for the individual as well, from their mum and dad or their loved ones. So anyway, we set up this service. It all worked fantastically. And because I showed sort of, I started with 10 and ended up with 30. So of course, other staff were like looking over their shoulder going, well, they don't want to go horse riding anymore. What are you doing? And I'm like, exactly what they want. So that was the beginning of a change for sort of the care services I was working in. And because of doing that piece of work, I was then invited to apply for an assistant manager role because everybody thinks care, you're always at the bottom, you're always going to be doing this sort of entry level work, which is fine if that's what you want to do, but you can have a career. Okay. And every time you go up in your career, you earn more money and get more training. So it's a win-win. Okay. Because people are saying, oh, could you not get any other job? And I'm like, yes, I can. And I'm actually, what I'm earning is probably more than you. Not that I like to sort of be bragful, because the wages, again, that's a nice thing to sort of drop in now. It starts at about 18,000, but goes up to 50,000. So it's comparably good money. So then I got my assistant manager role, and I was then managing staff and making more of a difference in the services. I was then had the power to sort of say, right, let's make some changes. Let's do this. Let's do that. And it was really exciting. Done some more training. And one of my training was I trained as an assessor for the care staff to gain their care qualifications. Like I'd had back in the day, I'd done mine and somebody had come in and supported me. So I did that and was quite happy as an assistant manager for a few years. And my teacher who taught me, coming one day, went, I tell you what, Paul, I think you'd be all right at doing some of this training, teaching, delivery. I'm like, really? Why? And because she was such a lovely person, I couldn't really say no. She said, well, give it a try. If you don't like it, you can always go back to the day centre. I'm like, yeah, okay then. And I tried it and I liked it because that then got me into a bigger playing field. So I'd outgrown my day centre. So now I had the whole of Hertfordshire to play out in and to work with all these amazing staff. And the great benefit was I still got my fix. And we call it a fix because when you're actually in the care world, it is like it's like an adrenaline thing. You can go in feeling absolutely miserable as on the Monday morning. By 9 o'clock, when them people come in and say, hello, Paul, how are you? Really pleased to see you. Tell you about their weekend. Any anger, any disappointment, any depression you got will go straight out the window because you've just got people who really genuinely want to be with you and you're doing exciting stuff. It's a really exciting job. So from there, I become, as I say, a trainer. And then I worked my way up to senior trainer. And then from there, I was then able to influence now what we call apprenticeships in social care because I started at 16 and then the world changed and said, oh, no, young people don't possibly want to come into this job. So I thought, well, actually, I've got a bit of power here. I'm going to just roll the dice and say, right, I'm going to run a program bespoke just for 16 to 19-year-olds. I had 73 applicants, which was amazing. And I could have employed everybody, but I only had money for 10. So that was a bit of a disappointment to me, but people did go on. So from that, we created a social care apprenticeship. So hence why we're now trying to change the demographics. We need people of all ages, all cultures. The great thing as well, the apprenticeship now is very successful. So if you come into our career and you're not certain, it will have the fix of you will continue with your education because that's really, really important. But you also earn some money and you'll be working in the care environment. It's free ticks, it's free wins, it's free cherries in a row. It's a jackpot, honestly. I've now sort of, as I say, I'm now doing the delivery of the training, but I do return to practice at least 1 or 2 days a month. So I visit all the day centres and quite often the staff go, would you mind just staying on because we're a bit busy? Yeah, of course I can. Then they have to sort of shove me out the door. It's like, you can go now, Paul. I'm like, oh, but I'm just in the middle of doing this activity with these wonderful people. And the other bit of work I do is in my local village, there's some people who sometimes need extra carers to be able, for them to access certain events. So this year, for example, they need an extra person to go to the Brits with them. I'm DBS checked, I'm fully experienced, and I know the individual well. I've known them since a child. So I went along to the Brits with them. Purely so, because there are additional needs. We met KSI, we've done loads of wonderful things. It's not always as glamorous as that. You do have the military brass bands as well, so it's not all Brits Awards and all that. So, yeah, it's an absolutely amazing career, honestly. You will never be bored. I mean, you might think, oh, is it for me? Because a lot of people do worry about the personal care side. Because let's face it, nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, do you know what? I really want to deal with, somebody's bowel motion, or there might be incontinent of urine. But again, you get trained for that, and you have to build a relationship with the individual. We'd never put them or you in a position where you feel uncomfortable or you make them feel uncomfortable. And you will learn it's a privilege to actually be part of their day, because it's an amazing experience supporting somebody, just because we all go for the big glory of, oh yes, I taught that person to cross the road, but that person being freshened up where they've been sort of, incontinent, that's a big win as well, because that the smile, the conversations you have with the individual, and it's done in minutes. Honestly, people go, well, I don't think I could deal with people being sick. Again, you get trained to it, and then when you're out with your friends and they're sick, you're always the one that clears them up.
Yeah.
I never thought I could do it.
I was like you. I started my career in social care and I was 17, like you, very, very naive. And I think, like you say, that personal care, intimate care side of the thing is the one thing you're just like, oh, I'm just not sure how I'm going to cope with dealing with that kind of intimate care with an adult. But like you say, before you even start doing that, you start forming a relationship and getting to know the service users, of the people, the individuals that you're working with, and then you start realizing just how important it is to be able to give them that piece of dignity as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You will never do it on your own until you are ready either. There will always be a more experienced person with you. And your day will come when you are the more experienced person that's giving the sort of supporting arm around the shoulder, proverbially, to that person who's going, oh, I don't know if I can do this. And you will. You will crack it.
And I think as well, like when we both started out, I don't think the induction process, so that kind of start training, was particularly well developed at the time. So we were kind of a lot of the time thrown in the deep end and just kind of expected to know what to do. And you had the advice and the guidance from current staff, but it wasn't as well developed as it is now. Whereas now, you receive an awful lot of training, so you have a good level of competency before you're working with individuals on your own and doing stuff by yourself. And there's a shadow period as well when you're working alongside staff, watching what they're doing, observing, and they're giving you that kind of step by step kind of hints and tips on how to do different things, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'm privileged that I actually support, because we do a 2 week induction for any new starter, be you somebody who's got 50 years experience or no experience. Everybody comes on the induction together. So you, as Kate said, you will have your 2 weeks minimum of formal training. Then you do your shadowing for, it's approximately up to 12 weeks. It can feel like, I can do this, but until you're happy, the other staff are happy, go with the flow, because your time will come when you are that person that shows that individual. And Rome wasn't built in a day. And again, that's not the end of your training. You get your 2 weeks, and then you will go, oh, actually, I'd like to know more about autism, for example, or people with learning disabilities with dementia, for example. It could be all sorts of things that might just light up your mind. And we provide training for that. So it's lifelong. And then after 6 months, we actually put staff on the qualification course. So you can obtain your level 2, 3, 4, 5, up to degree and postgraduate level qualifications as well. So it's not the dead end that some people believe. But as Kate said, it has changed over a lot of years. And by investing in you, that's investing in the people we support.
Yeah. And I think as well, it's a really good platform to then look at other careers as well. So if you're like your passion is around the behaviour side of things, maybe you can go towards a psychology degree or career. Or if you then discover, a lot of people go into things like occupational therapy or
Yeah.
speech and language therapy, having experienced it whilst they're working in social care. And it gives you a really, really good, strong background of that person-centered care and how to support people appropriately, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And as you say, Kate, we sponsor people, and we do sponsored routes as well, because for not everybody can afford to go to university because of family circumstances. So if you stay with us for 2 years, you can then apply for sponsored routes into degrees like learning disability nursing, social work, occupational therapy. And I know my health colleagues offer drama therapy and art therapy, radiography. Oh, it's an endless list of career pathways you can go in. But the best thing you can say to the university is, I've worked on the frontline in services. That will put you so far ahead when you go off to university to qualify, because the book can teach you so much, but actually being in a service will just be so much education for you.
Because as well, I think as well, people don't appreciate just the diverse nature of services. So you yourself, you worked in a day service for elderly people. You worked in a day service with people with a learning disability. You worked in supported living, and each of those services, whilst you are looking after vulnerable people, the types of activities that you do and the skills you need are very different, aren't they?
Oh, it's a vast range. You will surprise yourself with what you know and how you can deal with situations that normally you might think, I've run a mile from. And you will learn other languages, because each individual you support may speak a form of English, for example, but they have different versions of it. And you will be the one tuning in going, the sound they're making actually means they're happy or they want a drink. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is so clever. You learn money budgeting. You will learn how to cope with members of the public who may be discriminatory, believe it or not. In 2025, we still have people discriminatory, and how you have to deal with that and support the individual. You'll grow a lot of interpersonal skills, a lot of confidence and strength in your own belief in yourself that you may not have had before. Maybe you might think, well, I'm a bit of a shy person, but once you come into social care, you'll find your shyness will soon vanish.
Oh, I'm
Especially,
yeah. I'm terrible at advocating for myself, but when I'm in a situation and I have to advocate for somebody else, I am fierce. I'm like a dog with a bone. So yeah, you do kind of adapt very quickly, don't you?
oh, you do. I mean, personally, I'm terrified of horses, but for 8 years, I led the horse riding group because that's what my people I was supporting wanted to do. 8 years every Tuesday morning at Paradise Park. It'd be like, oh no, it's horse riding. And I put the smile on, thinking, help. But you do it, you will find inner confidence in
So what
yourself.
would you consider the key skills to be then to work in care?
Be open minded. Be very much a world person, because you will work with people from all around the world, from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, maybe to yourself. So it's all about communication and listening are the two most important. The rest of it you can develop. Listen, communicate, and be honest. They're the skills. If you don't know something, say, I don't know. Don't flounder around and try and make it happen and it all goes, wrong. They're the main ones. Be very open-minded about individuals, because you will read reports on people that may take your view of them. Look beyond what's written. Form your own opinions. Just be confident. And you will, and be honest with yourself. Things will go wrong. A lot more will go right, but other things might go wrong. And don't beat yourself up on that. Just be very open-minded that it didn't work today, but it might work tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think the thing as well, the beauty of social care is you don't necessarily need qualifications to get started in social care, but you can gain qualifications on your journey through, can't you? And build up your kind of portfolio of personal development.
And that's what we like. We like people who are almost blank sheets of paper, because then we can mold you in our own image. So we can train you up. It's like anything. We all get bad habits. And when you eventually learn to drive, you'll find that all your bad habits will come out once you pass your test. Until then, you can't. But yeah, we train you up. We give you the confidence, because you bring a different view to things. Because we've always done it one way, doesn't mean to say that's the right way. I mean, for example, we had a gentleman who come to our service who wished to go to a place of worship, but where he wished to worship, the men and women worship different sides of the place of worship. And the staff team were predominantly female, and the females were not allowed in the male side, and he was a male. And it wasn't until a new member of staff come in, and every Friday this gentleman would say, "Can I go?" And they'd be like, "We got nobody to take you. We're really sorry." And she said, the new member of staff come in completely new, and he said to her, "Can I go?" And she went, "Well, why can't you go?" "Oh, well, because females can't come on my side." She said, have we rung the place of worship? And they spoke to them. She rung the place of worship. So this is, I went, oh, we've got trained people for just such an occurrence. Of course, we've got these people, DBS trained, hoist trained, all this training. So now this person can go on a Friday to his place of worship and spend a day with his community that he's choosing to spend time with people that he wants to. And that was a new member of staff come in. So all the years of training, hundreds of years of experience in this unit, nobody had thought of making a phone call. So be the difference.
I do think actually new staff always bring a new perspective to things, and they always, well, in the process of learning, they ask why a lot, and then sometimes you're thinking, that's a really good question. Why do we do it that way? Isn't there a better way of doing things?
Absolutely.
Now, another thing you touched on, which was quite difficult, you found when you're working with elderly people, is dealing with death. Because, you know, that does happen. It also happens occasionally in learning disabilities, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
So kind of how do you cope with that? Because it is quite a difficult thing, especially when you're young. Not many people have had to deal with it in their own personal life, let alone in a professional manner.
So the way I coped with it was, and it was an older member of staff who, you know, when I was first supporting somebody who'd passed over, we did what was called laying out. That's where you prepare the person for the relatives to come in, you put the makeup back on, you just make them as you would if they were still breathing. And she said, you still talk to them like they're going to answer you back and show respect. And just think of all the happy times you've had with that person, the difference you made in their lives. It was still sad, but then you thought, yeah, actually, we did have a good time. We did have a dance. We did share fish and chips. We did share, you know, the newspaper stories and, you know, that sort of thing. And we did have some good days together. And now is your time to, whatever happens next, I have no idea to the person. But I have the privilege now of saying goodbye to you at your final stage and supporting the families as well, and sort of saying and reminiscing with them and going, well, actually, your loved one, yeah, yesterday we were playing cards or something. So you give them a nice memory rather than the last memory they have is seeing their person passed over. And it is, as Kate said, you know, we do have, unfortunately, people who pass over with a learning disability as well. And sadly, they do die many years before people from the mainstream elderly community. There is a lot of research into why. It used to be, oh, because they're disabled, they died. It's like, well, that's not acceptable. So now there's a groundswell from people, good people like your news people that are coming into the care going, well, why did they die? Why did they die 20 years before the average life expectancy of a male or female person? So now there is, and that's also, we do have a team that actually looks into why people, I mean, I know it's sort of a side that you might be interested in. You actually look at the forensic side of why did this person die? And looking at what changes can be made. And that's up to and including now people having fair access to health screening. Whereas before you were disabled, you didn't go for sort of, how can you put it, women's checks, you know, breast screening, etc. And for the men, it was the prostate checks, you know, things like that, because they're disabled, they don't need it. So now we're looking at all that sort of thing, access to dentists, things like that. So we're doing, and that's where you as new staff can make the difference by supporting them to go to these appointments and advocating for them and saying, yes, they should be seen.
Absolutely. And I think as well, like care can be difficult at times. Sometimes you'll see some very difficult situations. You might see some challenging behaviour. But I think you have a very tight staff group, don't you, in care? Kind of supportive management team as a rule. And they're there to give you that help and that guidance when you're having a difficult time. And as a team, you kind of come together, don't you, and kind of see each other through it as well.
Absolutely. You will make lifelong friends. There's no I in team. Everybody works as part of the team. So if somebody is distressed or displaying behaviour that challenges, you will be trained in how to deal with that, but you will also have a debrief afterwards. There's the formal debrief where you actually go off floor for 15 minutes to up to a day to sort of recover. And there's the informal side where you might go for a tea or coffee or other beverages are available just to decompress a bit and say, oh, what happened there? You know, you're quite shocked because it is a bit of a shock when you first see it. I mean, wow, you know, I didn't expect that. We've had a great day. We've been to Southend for the day, and suddenly they're breaking up their bedroom, for example. What happened? They're in our care because they have a need, and that's what we sometimes we forget. We can be quite distressed by it, but there's lots of support. There's in-house support, and we also have an employee assistance program. So people go home that night, and you've decompressed with your staff group and your friendship group, and it might be 1 a.m. You wake up and think, "Do you know what? I'm really upset still." There's a free phone number which you can ring, and a human being, not an AI, will actually speak to you and talk you through what's happening. And if need be, we can arrange further counselling for people. So there's a 360 round care. It's not, I wear it as a badge of honour because, I've been in a really tough situation. You do have to have your team, and your managers will also look at it, because every single person has what we call supervision. So once a month, you will sit down with your line manager and talk about your work and your life, etc., etc. But in situations like that, the management will take you off floor and just have a chat with you and get you a coffee, a tea, or water, whatever your beverage choice is, non-alcoholic, of course. We're on duty. Regardless, you see all these old people with their sherries, that's not for staff. Okay, so we do a lot of decompressing that way with staff as well. And sometimes it may be we say to somebody, "Look, just go home." That's not because we think you're weak. That's because you've had a really bad day, and you actually do need to go home and be with some loved ones just to regather yourself and reflect on what's happened. And we also do aftercare follow-up. So you have that, and we then do some check-ins with you. It might be a phone call or a text, whatever your preferred way is. We check in you're okay.
So what kind of advice would you give if someone is looking to work in social care? How would they go about sort of starting to look for employment?
Well, there's a brilliant site on the NHS careers. So you can Google that. There's the .gov.uk apprenticeship website, which we advertised on. You can also look up care providers in your local area and make direct contact with them and say, "I'm interested in applying to work with you." And they may offer you some work experience and say, "Well, actually come in." You can't go straight on floor, obviously. Just walk in and go, here's get on with it. They have a small interview with you, sound you out, see what you're about, and then people can then do some shadow shifts and work experience, because it might be what you expect or might not be what you expect. So say I was completely shocked with all my years of caring with the elderly that I was shocked by people with a learning disability. I thought, because I believe care is care. So again, I'd make contact that way. Talk to your careers advisors, your teachers, your family. You might find that the family got friends who work in the industry, and look at podcasts, YouTube, etc., etc. Please always don't look at the negatives, because sadly there is, as there is in anything, because there's 1.5 million of us work in the care sector. There's always going to be one or two bad eggs that always make the news. The news that you don't hear is somebody's learned to walk again, somebody's been able to eat their own dinners. It's big wins like that that are not pressable. But again, please have a look round. Use the Care Academy. Obviously, you can email into them. They've got a wealth of materials and resources to share.
Yeah, I think, like you say, it's really important because different services run in different ways, don't they? And if you check out people's websites just to see the kind of activities they do, that's a really good starting point. And like you say, sometimes it's a case of picking up the phone, which is always awkward when you don't know somebody.
Yes.
But just saying, "Look, I saw that you were advertising this job. Could you give me a little bit more of an idea of what the day-to-day activities and job requirements are?" Because that's a really good way of getting a feel for the place as well, isn't it? And if the person is very friendly and open and very chatty, you already know that that's going to be a supportive environment to work in as well, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And ask to visit as well. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't be put off by the switchboard, and don't believe all what you see on telly, because we've all watched Casualty and it all runs really smoothly and it's all very dramatic. But in the NHS, for example, there's 643 roles minimum. So don't always believe what you see on the set. And having a visit as well, because then you get to speak to staff, you get to hear the sights and sounds. I really strongly recommend, as Kate said, make the phone call, because I know a lot of people don't like making phone calls anymore because it's all text, isn't it, and email. In the care side, people really do like a human ringing and going, "Hi," and
Yeah.
going, "It's a human," because it's a very human-based workplace you're going into. So don't be put off. Have the confidence, make the phone call.
And I think, like you say, I don't. I've worked in care for many, many years, and I don't think you realise the impact you have on the individuals you work with. And I think that's one of the massive selling points, isn't it, for the job role? I remember working with some people when I first started out in my 20s, and I saw them like 20 years later, and they saw them in the street, and they were like, "Oh, Kate, Kate, Kate," and then they started talking to me about holidays I've taken them on in the past. We went to Greece and Butlins, and they were like full of it. And they were even asking me about my pets, and so it was just like, this is 20 years later,
Oh
having
yeah,
moved on and kind of worked in lots of different areas. They still remember the times that we had together, and you're thinking, well, that's a massive impact that I've had as an individual on someone's life and made it a happier place for a time.
absolutely. It's a real privilege, and there's not many other jobs that I could think of that would give you that sort of feedback. You know, as you
Yeah,
say, their memories, they're still thinking about the memories of going on holiday with you. I mean, how amazing is that? You know, you've
yeah.
moved on, you know, might not even recall it, but to them, that was an amazing snapshot in their life when there's not a lot else in their life because we've learned this, but we can't make them better. We can make them more independent. And the holidays and sharing, you've got pets, that's a real wow factor for them, you know. So
So, just to finish off, what would be the kind of one tip you'd give young people if they're thinking of working in social care?
give it a try. You won't be disappointed. That's my main strap line. I was completely surprised that I loved it and I still love it to this day because when I was 16, it was not the career I was going to take. So try it, you will really enjoy it. And don't be worried if you're really, really nervous about when you first walk in and there's just this sea of faces looking at you. Try it within the hour, you'll be embedded in it, you'll be bingo calling, you'll be dancing. So please, please, please give it a try. And then you find out if it's for you or not. You know, that's the
And,
other thing.
if, for example, working with elderly isn't your thing, try different areas because learning
Oh,
disability is always my
absolutely.
passion. And I always quite like the people with slightly more complex needs. So that was the
Absolutely.
area that I really, really enjoyed working in. And everybody has a slightly different. My brother-in-law, he works in care and he works with elderly people and he loves it. And, learning disabilities isn't an area he's really particularly
No.
interested in. So everybody has different passions and different likes. So just like you said earlier, be open-minded and give it a go.
Yeah, and you will decide whether it's for you or not. And if
Yeah.
not, there's lots of other career pathways. If you don't want to do the direct care, there's business support, there's radiography, there's lots of connected jobs that don't require you to be on the front line, but are very, very essential in enabling us to do our jobs. It might be you like
Well,
finance, you know, we like to get paid.
yeah, now that you mentioned it, there is a really good website called Skills for Care. So if you look up Skills for Care, and on Skills for Care website, it has lots of different informations about the various job roles, specifically in social care. And it's a really good website. It's got videos. It's even got some sort of bits and bobs of training you can have a look at as well. Potentially even do some of the care certificate through that website as well. So Skills for Care is a really, really good website to look at. I think that's it for us for today, Paul. Thank you
Great.
very much for coming in and sharing your story and talking to us about social care. I hope everybody watching picked up some information and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.